The film opens in the bustling city of New York, focusing on an apartment building. A teacher, Mrs. Daigle, returns to her apartment, but something doesn't feel right. She can't shake the feeling that someone is watching her. As she tries to unlock the door, the building superintendent, Mr. Johnson, appears and tells her that the master key for the apartments has gone missing, and that the locks on the entire floor will be changed the next day. Before leaving, he also suggests moving her to a cheaper apartment, but she declines the offer. Inside the apartment, we see that she lives with her brother, Brad, who is severely paralyzed. She tells him she's going to another room to grade papers and puts on some music to help him relax. But while she works, something terrifying happens in Brad's room. Mrs. Daigle hears movement and groans. When she returns, the music is off and her brother is distressed. She turns the music back on and tries to calm him. Later, while reviewing assignments, she feels a chill when she sees on the monitor that Brad's door is open. She approaches cautiously and finds him even more agitated, and stranger still, he's holding the missing master key in his hand. Brad becomes aggressive and repeatedly screams at her to get out of the room. When she obeys, the apartment goes completely dark. She threatens to call the police, and then something attacks her. An invisible entity stabs her in the leg with a red pencil. Desperate, she locks herself in Brad's room, only to discover that her brother now has his throat slit. As the attacker pounds on the door non-stop, she screams for help, but no one hears her. The intruder eventually breaks in, even though the room appears empty. The teacher hides under the bed, hoping to survive. The attacker seems to leave, and when she reaches for the key, she realizes it's still in the room. The entity kills her brutally with a pencil, stabbing her in the eyes and hand. The story then shifts to Phil Lodge, a widowed former police officer who is applying for the superintendent position in the same building. After his wife's death, he left the police force to take care of his daughters, Violet, 14, and Rose, 7. Phil visits the building because Mrs. Daigle, Violet's favorite teacher, had recommended an apartment to him. There, he learns about the available superintendent job, which would allow him to work close to his daughters. During a conversation with Mr. Johnson, Rose hears a strange chanting coming from the basement and goes to investigate, while Violet, rebellious and distracted with a book, does not watch her as their father asked. In the basement, Rose encounters a disturbing man named Walter, who recites an ancient mantra and asks for her name. Meanwhile, Violet meets Vondel, a boy playing with a ball, and ends up smoking with him while Phil receives instructions from Mr. Johnson. When they go downstairs together, Mr. Johnson locks the mechanical room door to prevent Phil from entering. As they walk through the basement, the superintendent tells him to ignore some photos because they belong to the previous super, Walter, and warns him to be careful with him because he's into weird Ukrainian witchcraft. Since the staff rooms are occupied, Phil moves temporarily into a run-down basement apartment. When he returns to the lobby, he discovers that his daughters have disappeared. A neighbor, Beverly, says she saw a 14-year-old near the basement. Phil finds Violet smoking with Mondell. When the boy leaves, Phil confronts her for losing sight of Rose. Rose appears, calling her father from the stairs. She wants a ball like the one Vondel had. Beverly comes back to make sure everything is all right and introduces herself kindly. After she leaves, Rose says she doesn't like the place, but Phil tries to reassure her. Meanwhile, Walter continues reciting his spells in the basement. In another apartment, Mrs. Gray senses a strange presence in her living room. She leaves a knife on the table. The television turns on by itself, the knife disappears, and then she hears someone tampering with the lock. A noise in the kitchen scares her when her dog drops its bowl, and suddenly something attacks her. Later, things grow unsettling for the Lodge family when Rose sees her doorknob moving. Phil looks through the peephole and sees Walter trying to get in, who apologizes and says he thought the apartment was empty. Before leaving, he gives Rose an unnervingly disturbing look that leaves her trembling. The next day, while cleaning out Mrs. Daigle's apartment, Phil meets another super, Julio, who tells him the teacher supposedly moved out suddenly and left all her belongings behind. Since the furniture no longer has an owner, they can take it, and Phil uses this opportunity to furnish his new room with Julio's help. Later, Julio runs into Violet, who remains distant and withdrawn. That night, Phil wakes up and finds his room door open. Panicking, he checks on his daughters, but Rose is missing. He rushes out and reaches the basement, where he sees the dark silhouette of a man at the end of the hallway. The figure vanishes, and Phil keeps searching until he finds Rose standing in front of the furnace, staring at the flames as if hypnotized. The next day, Walter approaches Phil, saying he saw Rose wandering. Phil is shocked because he never told him her name, which only heightens his unease about him. Then, Phil overhears Mr. Johnson instructing an employee to check Mrs. Gray's apartment because neighbors are complaining about the dog barking. When they enter, they find only the dog on the couch, without any trace of the woman. Phil decides to take care of the animal temporarily and brings the dog bed home for Rose, which enrages Violet, who feels her father always favors her sister. Furious, she leaves in the elevator while Walter watches her and Vondel through the cameras. Beverly finds Violet smoking outside the laundry room and invites her in to comfort her. Meanwhile, in Vondel's apartment, someone knocks on the door. When he looks, he hears music. Beverly and Violet hear the same sound, but when they check, no one is there. Beverly turns around, and Violet has disappeared. At the same time, Vondel sees a screwdriver on the floor, bends down to pick it up, and something attacks him. The next day, Phil asks Julio for a flathead screwdriver, but Julio thinks he left it somewhere. At that moment, the police arrive to report Vondel's disappearance. Phil then asks Julio about Walter, and Julio admits he's unsettled by the strange photos the man collects. Worried about his daughters, Phil goes downstairs and finds them safe and sound. Violet, devastated by the news about Vondel, deletes his photo from her phone. Later that day, while Phil is working in the basement, Rose goes down without permission and runs into Walter again. He tells her a disturbing story about a hermit, then accuses the girl of knowing what happened to Vondel. His behavior turns threatening as he chases her, demanding that she take him to the boy. Phil steps in and warns Walter to stay away from his daughters forever. The next day, driven by suspicion, Phil tries to enter the mechanical room, but Mr. Johnson comes out at that moment and orders him to work in the hallway instead. Later, Phil and his daughters attend Julio's birthday party on the rooftop. Meanwhile, Walter performs a ritual with dirt and leaves and takes advantage of the family's absence to sneak into their apartment. He sprinkles the mixture on Rose's bed, searches the home, and hides in a closet when he hears Phil returning. Rose approaches her bed, notices something is wrong, and becomes dizzy. She tells Phil she smells something strange, and he discovers the mattress soaked with dirt and leaves. While cleaning the mattress outside, Phil sees Walter coming out of the basement. Convinced that he broke into their home, he confronts Walter and threatens to kill him if he ever approaches his family again. Beverly stops the fight and kindly invites Phil in for coffee to calm down, but the visit is interrupted when her flower pot appears broken for no apparent reason. Phil leaves, saying he has urgent things to take care of. Shortly after, Beverly hears the same eerie music and a knock at her door. She sees a figure through the peephole. Meanwhile, Mr. Johnson is showing Mrs. Daigle's apartment to new tenants. While cleaning it, they find a bloody footprint. Julio calls the supervisor to show him, but Mr. Johnson simply wipes it away, acting like it's nothing. The new tenants decide to stay, and Johnson behaves as if everything were completely normal. Suspicious of him, Phil convinces Julio to investigate the mechanical room together. There, they discover a hole that leads directly into the women's bathroom, exposing Mr. Johnson as a creep. At the same time, Violet becomes trapped in the elevator and tries to call for help. Walter, who controls the cameras, manipulates the elevator and sends it down to the basement. When it opens, Violet steps into an empty, terrifying space. As she searches for a way out, Walter appears reciting his strange spells in an unknown language. Violet runs in panic and eventually encounters Phil, but instead of hugging him, she blames him for not taking better care of her. Enraged and now convinced that Walter is responsible for the disappearance of Mrs. Gray and Vondel, Phil decides to plant evidence. He enters Mrs. Gray's apartment and takes a piece of her cane, then goes into Walter's apartment and finds a disturbing collection of children's shoes, women's purses, and Rose's hairbrush. Certain of Walter's guilt, he places the cane fragment inside a drawer and anonymously calls the police. Walter is arrested and Mr. Johnson is questioned about Mrs. Gray's disappearance, though he acts as if he knows nothing. With Walter gone, Phil feels safer and grows closer to Beverly, telling her about his wife's death,
a fire that destroyed their home. He only managed to save Rose and himself. His wife died trapped upstairs while Violet was playing outside, which led Violet to blame her father for years. The next morning, Phil receives terrible news. Walter has been released for lack of evidence. Julio tells him the police found nothing else in his apartment. With Walter back, Phil is more on edge than ever. Walter returns to work and uses a lock of Rose's hair, tying it around a nail as if preparing something sinister. The next day, Phil must help new tenants with their locks and leaves his daughters in Julio's care. But Julio gets distracted when a staff member leads him to another unit. After finishing his work, Phil finds another leaf identical to the one discovered in Rose's bed and realizes something terrible is about to happen.
He runs home and asks Violet where Rose is. She answers coldly that he already knows. Phil heads straight to the basement to look for Walter, but doesn't find him. He tells Violet to lock herself in the apartment and continue searching. He finds Walter next to the furnace, heating a chain. When Walter refuses to give any coherent answer about Rose, Phil attacks him violently as Violet watches in horror. She runs off and heads to Beverly's apartment. Amid the chaos, Phil finally finds Rose, who says she was hiding from a bad man. Meanwhile, Julio returns to the hallway and discovers something horrifying: Vondel's ball and a dollhouse with 4 figurines, 2 of them burned. Elsewhere, Mr. Johnson discovers that Phil lied on his resume. The Newburgh police have no record of him. At the same time, Julio gets a call from Phil, who sounds desperate and says he ruined everything. Julio goes down to the basement to help him. Phil tells him what he thinks Walter has done, but the man's body has mysteriously vanished. Julio notices Vondel's ball and, confused, asks about it, but Rose appears and says it's hers. Here, the story takes a sinister turn. Julio says he's never seen Rose before. The girl replies that most people don't see her until it's their time. Then she starts a game, and when it ends, the music begins again. And then it happens. Phil kills Julio by slitting his throat. Crying, he tells him he was his friend. Rose replies that Julio discovered the truth. The truth comes out when Violet, desperate, confesses to Beverly what she has been hiding for years. Rose died 7 years ago. She was 7 years old and Violet's twin sister. Beverly can't believe it, since Phil speaks about Rose as if she were alive, but Violet insists only Phil and Walter can see her. Violet continues, even though Rose died, she kept removing from their lives the people she cared about. She claims it was Rose who killed Mrs. Daigle, Vondel, and possibly even Mrs. Gray because she wanted her dog. Then she reveals something even worse. Rose caused the fire that killed her mother because she used to punish her for her misbehavior. When Violet told her father what had really happened, he lost control, snapped Rose's neck, and threw her out the window. But the girl never truly left. In the basement, Mr. Johnson finds Phil incinerating Julio's body. He tries to escape, but doesn't make it. Meanwhile, Violet tells everything to Beverly, who at first can't understand until she sees Phil and Rose together in the basement. Phil tries to attack Beverly, but Violet intervenes, giving her time to run. Amid the chaos, Walter appears, striking Phil with a tool and knocking him unconscious. Then he begins a ritual. Using a mix of soil, he immobilizes Rose and traps her with the heated chain. For the first time since her death, Violet is able to see her sister. Walter starts the final ritual, hammering nails into Rose's limbs as the girl screams in pain. Beverly, horrified, tries to help, but Violet warns her not to interfere because what Walter is doing is necessary. Even so, Beverly hits Walter, stopping him. Phil awakes, sees what's happening, and rescues Rose. Then he stabs Walter, unaware that the man was only trying to destroy the entity that had been haunting him and Rose for years. Phil, now completely consumed by his obsession, turns against Beverly, but Rose steps in, begging him not to hurt her because she wants a mother. Then Phil leads his family out of the building and orders Beverly to do everything Rose says if she wants to survive. At the very last moment, Phil asks Rose if they're finished. She looks at him with a dark smile and answers, "We're just getting started." Thanks for watching. Remember to like and subscribe for more movie breakdowns and recaps.